So hopefully you guys can all see this Mentimeter now. Mentimeter is kind of an online platform that we use to get students to engage and any members within workshops to engage. If you guys either scan this QR code or go to menti.com and enter this code right here, you can join our Menti. Much of this presentation, and we'll have a lot of questions that will use Mentimeter. So please go ahead and join, and we'll use it throughout the rest of our workshop here. Oops, looks like somebody is already in and you entered the code. So you can go ahead and just enter something different. Here we go. Nice. So we're getting things like, what word do you associate with student success? We're getting things like persistence, asking questions, effort, adaptable, resilience, support. Yep, support's getting bigger. So that means multiple people have said support. Yeah. Okay, great. Emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. And just a quick thought, because I like sharing thoughts as they occur to me, but we're associating these words with student success. But one of the things we want to start thinking about is, are we expecting like emotional intelligence? Are we expecting our students to come to us with that? Or is that part of what we're teaching as well? So just more food for thought. So yeah, effort and support are the top two that it looks like we're ranking with student success. So in the essence of time, I'm going to go ahead and move forward from there, and we'll just kind of highlight these. But effort and support are kind of the things that we said that we're most highlighting with student success. So I'm going to switch over to Lori. I'm going to let Lori take my seat here, and she'll go ahead and start presenting. We will try and keep our, get our workshop going this way. But for now, we'll just kind of present this way. So go ahead, Lori.
Excellent. So thank you all so much for bearing with us through these technical difficulties. And for responding. Some of the things that you all shared are right in line actually with some of the strategies that we're going to share. And these are strategies that have really worked for us in our classrooms. And I'd like to actually start out with the idea of what the student mindset should be when it comes to learning. So I think it's really important for us to consider what the difference is between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. So to start off, actually, did we realize there was a difference? So what we're seeing now in learning is that the students have definitely changed over the years. We're starting to see more students come in with that fixed mindset where they believe that they have a certain level of intelligence, a certain type of abilities, and that's sort of that ceiling for them. And so those are some things that we might describe as having that fixed mindset where there's not really room for growth. It is what it is. This is who they are. This is what they're capable of. But as instructors, it's really important that we think about ways in which we can cultivate more of a growth mindset. So how can we utilize our class time and design our courses in ways in which students start to develop more of a growth mindset? Now,
should be a little button down there, or you can use
let's go. Okay, yeah, let's do that. Okay, so we'll go here. So this is a visual that you see on the right of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And what we want to think about is whether we are reinforcing a fixed mindset or cultivating a growth mindset in the classroom. So I would like you all to take a moment to just pause and think about that. Think about the way you design your courses. Think about the way that you communicate with your students. Think about the way that you design activities. Are you reinforcing that fixed mindset that many of our students are already entering our course with, or are you cultivating a growth mindset? So what we want to start thinking about is the ways that we frame failure, the ways that we frame learning, the ways that we frame challenges. Another thing that we should consider is how students compare themselves to others. So one of the things I've noticed whenever I observe my students in the classroom is at the beginning of the semester, many of them start to compare themselves to others in terms of grades, in terms of how many questions they get correct, how many questions they're able to answer in the classroom. And what we need to start considering is whether that has to do with the way in which they view learning and the ways in which they view success, which is another topic that we'll talk about today. So, oh, thank you. So actually, I don't, because we're short on time, we're actually going to skip through the role play today. And we're going to move forward to some strategies that our colleague Veronica is going to share with you. So I'm going to go ahead and switch out with Veronica here.
Hello and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Veronica King and I teach within the College of Nursing and Health Innovation. And so for this portion of our presentation, we do want to look at some of the things that are faculty initiated on how we start to honestly just prepare the stage for our courses with kind of pre-course launch, during our course launch, and then as we go through a course with students to really support the growth mindset and these strategies that we're talking about to bring into our curriculum. So we've kind of started to show these parallels. And honestly, if you think about it, it's really more of a spectrum. And I think as you work towards to facilitate a growth mindset in our courses and in our classrooms, whether they're online or in person, we really want to kind of take strides and look at these strategies and implement them slowly to kind of see what's the right connection for your course and your students and how we can continue to evolve the growth mindset in your course. So it's not meant to be kind of an overnight change. It's something we're all working towards. And so when we're looking at, so on this slide on the left, we have fixed mindset kind of statements and thoughts, and then more of the growth mindset. Ideally, as we prepare students for the workforce and for their future endeavors, we really want to foster that growth is an ongoing process, that we're always learning, that experience and skills and added knowledge makes us stronger for not only completing this goal of a degree, but also for how does that translate into the workforce? Because we all know that in the workforce, growth continues and skills continue and knowledge continues. And so when you're looking at this, one of the things I did as a side with this presentation was to put portions of my syllabi into ChatGPT to evaluate how much of this is speaking to the growth mindset. And so that was really great because it let me to look at language like office hours and things like that on how am I presenting, what language am I using? Is it very stringent? Now, to be fair, there are portions in our syllabus that are going to be stringent, relevant to policies and procedures and very fixed processes that are either coming out of our programs or out of our campus. But within those, we can kind of weave a lot of the language that is supportive to show the students where there's flexibility and where there's support for them as they're navigating kind of these requirements. And so again, on the left, you have the fixed mindset, what kind of that black or white. And then in growth mindset, we have the colors of the spectrum in terms of how is their growth? How do we show students that we know we're here to meet them where they're at and get them to where they want to be? And so that that plays into the skills and the activities that we develop within our courses, the language that we use, the feedback we provide, and then also the resources that we use that are on campus. So just to bring it to kind of a smaller scale, and again, we are using words like syllabus, but this can really be for any material that's student facing where we are offering them opportunities for growth. And so that can be really looking at the language we use in our materials. Does it communicate that we have a welcome environment? So to also pull in the pillars of our peers in these 3 tenets within the student experience project. So are we facilitating that this is a place for them, they belong here, that we're here to support them, that we will make sure that if we're not the first point of a resource, that we can get them to the right point of resource. And then understanding that everyone is going to have a path of growth and what that looks like. So looking at kind of some examples, so some really hardcore takeaways. So for instance, in those course descriptors and discussing the evolution of how your course builds on prior knowledge, which is pulling into adult learning theory. How do we discuss that and put the language in terms of we are building on material that you've already learned? But considering when you covered said previous material, your prerequisites, and how well you did, those may come back to you in terms of we may need to continue to strengthen certain areas, and that's expected. That's expected. Everyone will have some kind of challenge somewhere. And so I think when you normalize that every student will have a unique journey and every student may have challenges, it really does create that safe space that when those experiences come to students, that they know, this is part of the process. I am going to kind of need to dust off some of the things I've learned before. And so that speaks to, building on prior knowledge, but also something as simple as your office hours and how we delineate that, especially when we talk about first generation students, sometimes not making assumptions of what people know about certain procedures on campus and just really describe how students can utilize the things that are available to them. So for example, office hours are by appointment and they're intended to support your learning. If you have questions on assignments, if you are finding that you're not where you want to be in this course. And so things like that can kind of offer a more welcoming invite, as well as show that these opportunities with your faculty or whoever the resource is, are there for you to continue to grow in this course and get to where you want to be. So a couple of strategies that I look at. So we just went through a couple of things that are pre-syllabus, so before your students come to you. And then now let's set the stage for what that first visit looks like. And I know for my first class, I kind of equate it to dating. I'm like, this is a first date for me, guys. I chose what I was going to wear. I'm a little nervous because we're meeting for the first time. I also know that based on this experience, you may or may not come back. So I'm really invested in giving you my best self on this first class. And one of the things that I share here is what I do in my first class. And I call it The Professor is Human. But I show myself, what is my belonging story? What does my journey look like? And how does this class become a part of that story? And so this is my class 1 introduction. This is actually a more interactive, where I kind of bring out these pictures one at a time. But I start with, who I am. I introduce myself that I'm on level 48 of my life. And that creates my own journey and my own quest for success. And maybe it connects with some students who like gaming. And so this story talks about how I grew up in San Antonio. I have a picture of me as a nursing student in the nursing program where I teach my nursing students. This is me as you, but a little bit further back in time. And then I show my growth and my journey as working as a nurse, what nursing has offered for me, and how my story continues to evolve. And what that presents for me is an opportunity to talk about my teaching philosophy, to meet people where they're at, to include my students, to also emphasize that for patient care and how we meet our patients where they're at. And then honestly, it also brings in my why. Not only am I here to serve these students, but me being part of this campus and this moment in my life is still part of my own story. And so I'm continuing to evolve that. So this is something great. It's very vulnerable. It's a reverse icebreaker, I call it, but it's a way where we put ourselves in a space to show our growth and our learning and how we didn't just, we weren't just born educators, but we've taken a lot of time and experience to grow that skill and that knowledge and that experience. So we've gone through pre-syllabus or pre-course, course, and now we're actually in the schedule of the course. And so one of the things with growth mindset is just continuing to support as these little steps of evolution happen. One of the things that has worked for me is continuing to pace my students. And so as kind of talking about this course as a trip, this is my syllabus is the roadmap for where we're going to go. But just as you take a trip and you have to do preparations and things change and you pivot and you learn some things along the way and maybe your paths all look different, but we all get to the same destination. That's kind of what this looks like. And so specifically, some of the things I also bring is I bring back the syllabus in pieces. And so as each module unfolds, I will talk about what portions of the syllabus are relevant, like how much is this assignment worth? What are some tips on this assignment? Where's the rubric? What are some key things for student success? And so as you pace the students through the course, you're able to give them kind of those tools for success in context. When do they matter? And so that's one of the ways that I'm able to do that every week before I start content or lecture. I'm able to deliver, hey, so this is where we're at in the course, this is where we're headed, we've met these learning objectives, and then this is our assignments and how they align with what we're learning today. So it really does offer a guide. You're kind of like a travel guide on this whole trip. All right, so okay, so for this, if you will, with our mentee interactive process, think about a time that you struggled to learn something new. So going back to your own growth, again, reflecting on what that looks like for you. In 1 or 2 words, what helped you persist? So maybe kind of think of it as putting yourself in that student perspective. What are the things that helped you persist, persevere in helping you learn something new? Mentoring. I love that. Support. Being patient with myself. Yes. Mentors. And these are great concepts because just based on what we covered in the past 3 slides, if you really approach kind of teaching in that mentorship way, and you as just a couple of steps before your students, and that's how we're able to kind of help guide them forward. And honestly, these are things that when I pull my students that they say, please be patient with me, please have grace, help me learn what I need to learn. And that's why we're here. So these are great. These are just in line with what we're talking about. Wonderful. Okay, so we're going to give you some more strategies. I'm going to move forward from this question, and we're going to bring back Lori to keep bringing you more ideas.
Excellent. I'm back. Okay. So Veronica shared some great strategies that are initiated, driven by the instructor. So that was more about how the instructor delivers information. But there are also ways in which we can help cultivate a growth mindset, but by guiding the students rather than just driving the full conversation. And so I'm going to share some strategies that have worked really well for me over the past few years. I've seen drastic improvements in this when I started to change really some of the activities and the way in which I guided those activities in the classroom. I teach in person and I teach online. So for some of these strategies, I'll focus more on what has worked in person, and some have worked very well online. What I will say before I share these strategies with you all is when I first started out teaching back in 2018, I was that you know, what the picture you would paint of a college professor. I stood in front of the classroom and I just taught. I taught from slides, and I had some activities, but what I didn't like is that there wasn't a whole lot of engagement. So I really focused on how I can better engage my students, because as a former student, I knew that there's so much value in that. And one of the things that I realized when reflecting on my experience as a student was that you're able to co-create knowledge with your peers. And so I really took that and I used that as the foundation when I decided to modify some of my classroom activities. And so I'll share some of that with you. Now, the first thing I'd like to talk about is success versus failure, and how I've started guiding my students in reframing failure. I actually started out by telling them what failure is and is not, and that actually didn't work. So rather than telling them information, I changed my approach with students and I started guiding them. So I do a lot of individual reflections in the classroom where I get them to pause and think about it, and then they share. And I don't ask the right or wrong questions whenever I have students share, so that they feel more comfortable sharing information. And I will say that's one of the strategies that has really worked. Now, I'd like to share something with you all that worked so well for me over the past year. I really wanted to, what I realized is that students were just checking boxes. So on day one, I would typically ask students why they are in the class. And I think many of us might do that. But what I realized is I was getting a lot of, it's a required course, or it was the only elective available, or yeah, I want to learn about this topic, but also I just need to pass the class. And I didn't really like that because, as an instructor, we want them to want to learn. And so I changed my approach even on day one. And I really got this whenever I started teaching the entrepreneurship class. There is a topic on learning to fail, because entrepreneurs fail very often, and one idea might work, but the majority of them are going to fail. So that really started getting me thinking about how we fail more times in life than we succeed. And so on day one, I make sure to share that message with all students so that they realize we're leveling the playing field. It's okay to not earn an A on every single assignment. In fact, just checking boxes, that doesn't mean you're necessarily going to earn an A. But why should earning an A or be a high letter grade be the goal? So when I would ask my students what their goals are in the class initially, that was it. They want an A in the class. I didn't hear a lot of, oh, I really want to learn more about this particular topic. So I started changing my approach. And so something that I did that has worked really well, and I've actually done this now for every in-person course that I teach. On day one, rather than just using that day as the very easy day where we review the syllabus, the course expectations, and I share about myself, I use the remaining time as well. And so that really starts to help the students understand that this is not going to be a traditional class where you come to class and you listen to me lecture for an hour and 20 minutes and then you leave. So I use day one to really make sure that I'm getting students engaged, and so that they realize they can learn from each other and grow together. So something that I've done that has worked well is on day one, after I'm done explaining all the course expectations, ways to be successful in the course, is I have the students stand up, get in small groups, create a very short survey, and exit the room. And what they're doing is they're going out and they're asking random students questions. So there'll be maybe 1 or 2 questions. So for example, in my entrepreneurship class, I'll have my students go out and collect data on what others believe the biggest challenge today is that entrepreneurs face. In an organizational behavior class, I'll have students ask other students what they believe the biggest challenges are that managers face today. And so I know these are topics I'm going to talk about in the upcoming weeks. The students just aren't aware of that yet. They're just going out to ask random students questions. It gets them out of their comfort zone. It also makes them realize you're not just going to come to class and sit down and either zone out or listen. You're going to learn together. So that has been actually very, very helpful for me. And something that I realized this semester is that the students are learning to fail even through that short activity. I'll send them out for about 10 minutes, and then they come back and they'll evaluate their responses, and then they'll share with the class what they believe the best response was. But then I ask them about their experience. And it's the experience where they're really learning. It's not so much the data they collected. It's what happened when they went out there, because students will turn them down and they're not initially prepared for it. So on day one, they are learning to fail. Now, to take that a step further, of something that I've done, I did this semester, and so I wanted to make sure to share with you all because it was really successful. I've done it in the past, but it worked even better this semester. Is I created a scavenger hunt. So some of you in the College of Business might have seen my students walking around looking for objects that I actually didn't find. So I did an activity during the first few weeks of the course. I gave students specific rules. You can't damage property, you can't take something without someone's permission, so things of that sort. And there are only 5 objects that they need to go find. But the thing is, I didn't hide them. So I don't know whether they exist in the building. The students have to think outside of the box. They have to engage in discussions to see what ideas they can come up with. It gets them thinking on a deeper level. And when they come back to the class with their objects, hoping their objects pass the test, they're still talking. They're still engaging, and they're reflecting on their experience without me even having to tell them to. And so what I did this semester is, this isn't the first time I've done the scavenger hunt. That tends to go very well. But what I did this semester that was different is, after the activity, I asked my students who was successful
Three
today.
signs you're doing well and you're great.
And the majority of them raised their hands. And that's when I realized that they're not always just checking boxes, but we have to guide it. So I asked them who was successful. The majority of them raised their hands. And then I pointed out that no one found all 5 objects. So I asked again. So then I asked them again, who was successful considering that you didn't find all 5 objects? The same individuals raised their hands. So then I asked why. And some of the responses were because we learned, because we worked together, because we made progress. So rather than me telling them to focus on progress throughout the semester, not perfection, not getting an A, not checking the boxes, I wanted them to come to the realization themselves. So that was an activity that worked really well, and it really set them up for success throughout the rest of the semester. Now, I do have one more strategy that I want to share with you all. This has worked for both in-person courses, and I use this actually a lot for synchronous online courses. So as I shared, I like to create activities in which students are able to collaborate, so they begin to realize that they can learn from one another, not just the instructor. They can actually learn from one another, so then they're growing together. And so I try to encourage that even in my online courses. So something that I tend to do, especially with my synchronous online courses, is towards the end of a lesson, before I give my key takeaways, I break students into small breakout rooms, or if it's in class, I'll have them get into small groups, and I have them reflect on what they've learned throughout the course that day, and they develop their own key takeaways. Then they report out. And so I'll have them report out in different ways. Sometimes they'll just verbally share their group's key takeaways. So then everyone in the class is hearing what the other groups came up with. And they're never the same, they're always different. And what another thing I've done, rather than having them all report out, so for example, if you have a very large class, that might not work as well if you want them in small groups, and you don't want them in big groups for this kind of activity. You want them in small groups. And so if you have a very large class, then you might use the other approach. So another thing that I've done is I will have them delegate someone to be their writer, and that person will type their group's key takeaway in the chat box on Teams. So then we have it recorded, so I can go back to that at any time. Or I'll create a discussion board, and they'll have their writer post their group's key takeaway on that discussion board. I really like to take that approach, because then what I'll do is I take their key takeaways, I combine them, and then I post it on Canvas so students can reflect back on that. And at the end of the semester, I typically go to some of those earlier key takeaways that they've come up with, and I connect them with key takeaways that they've come up with for a later discussion. So I like to sort of bridge some of the things the ideas they've come up with throughout the course as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Heather.
Okay.
And you'll go ahead and get to the next part.
Okay, so I think the remainder of this actually is, let's hear your thoughts. You guys heard a lot from Veronica and Lori about, some ideas on how you can implement this into your syllabi or activities that you can do in your class. So now it's your turn. Why don't you guys suggest a place in your course where you think you can normalize failure or teach students learning to fail? So again, use your Mentimeter and let's see what you guys come up with. Yeah, I'll just comment on the classroom discussions. It requires a special skill, I personally feel like, but I think classroom discussions are great opportunities when you have students that have kind of conflicting ideas or disagreements, or even when students, you ask right or wrong questions and they answer the wrong question. It allows opening up to having a conversation about how that kind of answer is okay and that we learn from it. And we open our minds to other people's ideas.
What would you mind saying, woulda, shoulda, coulda, when you sat down for this or finished this, but I find that it's a different word, it'll promote that discussion too. Versus saying, what did you learn? If I can phrase it a little less.
Yeah.
threatening.
So I'm not sure if you guys can hear what Christine is saying, but she, one of our participants, she's also one of our SEP members. She really likes the idea of reframing. So maybe picking out a different word, or what, just kind of asking them, what's another way that you would approach that? Or how else could we, come at this idea or this question? Yeah. Just to kind of catch up on what you guys have been sharing here. Oh, look, it's right there. I teach learning to fail by reframing failure as just an iteration. Yes.
kind of a failing on the experiment. But the failing experiment is a way because we know how it works
Yeah.
without doing that thing. So the
Yeah.
next time, I
Yeah.
can do this, the learning to fail, like class, and to do the
Yeah. So our colleague here was, again, I'm not sure if you guys actually heard, but you know, it's really important in science to learn how to fail. And in his research labs, students will conduct experiments that look like failures. But these are just iterations. You have to keep replicating your experiment to fine tune your experiment in order to get some good results and to contribute to the body of knowledge and have other people replicate that as well. Just following up here, it looks like still on the science. Oh my gosh, this is working out perfectly. But during clinical validations, letting them know we want them to be able to practice safe and we learn from what is missed. Yeah. Yeah. Using specifications, gradings on some assignments so students need to revise or learn to succeed. Yes. Yeah, definitely allowing like redos, so that they can learn from their mistakes or scaffolding. If the goal is experience or progress, there is no failure. 100%. And exactly, we're all learning, right? We have to look at, and I tell my students too, all of your life experiences as well are opportunities to learn. They're not failures. We can learn from every difficulty that we have. I'm a mom of 20 somethings now, and I'm watching them struggle and I'm loving it. My daughter is feeling like a failure, and I'm like, no, I'm even more proud of you now because of how you're handling this, what you feel like is a failure, but how you're handling this difficulty. So, yeah. My large courses need to know that failure is going to happen. Yes, this is why I dropped the lowest exam grade. I agree. My small classes give them individual interaction. Rarely do they actually fail an exam. Yes, I do that. That kind of goes back to syllabi as well. It's important for us to develop our syllabi policies to build in opportunities for failure. Allow them to fail one of their assignments, allow them to fail one of their exams, allow them to struggle a little bit where it's not going to completely destroy their grade, but they, can improve it and move forward from there, kind of back to the, redoing assignments and fixing things like that. And then another one, I tell people, I teach that I'm just the lead learner. Yes, I love that. That's great. Yeah. I always tell them, I said, we're in this together. I just happen to have more experience on the topic than you do. But I by far do not know everything. And we're, working together, and you guys are going to ask questions that I don't necessarily know the answer to. So yeah, these are great. Thank you all so much for sharing. So now that you've shared, kind of ideas in that, we're going to engage you guys again. And now we've sat through this whole workshop on growth mindset, and I know we did most of the talking, but one of our biggest strategies with the Student Experience Project is we want teachers to follow our catchphrase, which is small changes, big impact. So we would like you guys to come up with one idea that you can implement in your classroom sometime over the rest of the semester. We're about halfway through. We got a little over a month left. What is one small thing that you can change in your classroom now that can impact the growth mindset of your students? So yet another Mentimeter. I'll let you guys kind of think about that for a minute and share as well. And I love cheating. I love for you guys to come up with ideas and let me copycat off of that, because I don't know it all, right? Like this whole student experience project, I am getting fantastic ideas by talking with colleagues and getting ideas. So please come up with an idea and be willing to share it with your colleagues that are here in our workshop. Yes, I'll plug AI too. ChatGPT and I have some really great conversations, and it takes me an hour to put together 3 sentences of well-formulated growth mindset. I can plug my idea into ChatGPT, not even full and complete sentences, and be like, please rephrase this in a way that communicates a growth mindset to my students, and it will spit back this beautiful phrase that is really connecting with the idea of growth mindset and so don't be scared of AI. Don't be scared. Yeah, role modeling. Mhm. Yeah. I told students I recently came across one of my high school report cards. And, I was one of those high school students that was like, I could do well if I wanted to, but I want a social life, so I'm not going to do that well, and like I've grown up knowing that I was like that because when I went to college, I did really well in college, but I actually came across a report card and I was like, I did way worse than I thought I did. It was like terrible. And so I told all my students that at the beginning of the semester, I was like, I saw my sophomore report card and it was bad. It was really bad. And I was like, but look at me now. Like we can all, yes, exactly. We can all learn and grow. So yeah.
Like, somebody asked me how was my college years. I'm like, well, I had fun the first time.
Uh-huh. Yes, exactly. And then I learned that I needed to change. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted, but you learn from those things. So
So let's look at some of these ideas here. Give my students motivation without sounding like a cheerleader. Yes, even though it's okay if you sound like a cheerleader. We're good. Yeah. In class, critical thinking, small group challenges that make them stretch course content. I think small groups are safer for students. They feel more comfortable talking in a small group. And so that kind of normalizes it's okay to make some mistakes. You've got some help there. But also that co-learning environment that we were talking about where they can kind of learn from their peers. Ask students to come up with interesting questions to understand the class material more deeply, then let them take a picture of it. Yeah, so, come up with a good question. This is why we love using Mentimeter, actually, because it allows my students to anonymously share ideas. So what you guys are engaging with, I use this with my students all the time. And like, how do you feel? What are your thoughts about this class? Are you doing well? Are you not doing well? And they're safe to share that information with nobody actually knowing who shared it. So I would recommend this tool too for you guys. And I need to let my students let my students know of my academic failures and that if I can do it, they can do it too.
Yeah.
I'm a first gen student. Yes. Yeah. I think this is where, culture is kind of shifting in who college professors are. And, we used to hold this superiority role, right? The professors were, separated as someone elite and, that you had to show some deference to. And nowadays, I've never personally liked that approach. And I really do think it's important for us to relate to our students. We're all adults. We've all been there. And I think it makes them feel empowered and respected when we actually show that we're all equals and we all, can relate to one another. So yeah, going back to exactly what Veronica was sharing. And we're humans. We're normal people. And the more and more I experience that, the more human I make myself to my students, the more comfortable I am in the classroom, and the more they can relate to me and the more comfortable they are coming to talk to me and feeling accepted in my classroom and kind of creating that sense of belonging. So last one I see here is small group to share how far they've come since the start of the semester. Yes, 100%. Share your progress, your successes, your failures, all of those things. Okay, so the last thing is what questions remain, although we are already at 1 o'clock. So I think we're going to wrap up. Ladies, if you want to come in and join. Sorry, we are still on our computer just now got back up to running again. So
We made it
we'll
work.
leave this and you guys can, leave any remaining questions at the end that you feel like you'd like to share. We are going to send a follow-up. We'll send this recording. I know Kim has already shared the slides with you and we'll just, follow up with some highlights here. So if you have any questions, we can address those in our follow-up too. But in the meantime, thank you guys so much for participating. We can't really see you right now. Let me see if I can switch my computer around so we can see you guys. Okay, there we are. Now we can see you guys. So again, I want to thank you guys all again for your patience in dealing with our technical difficulties. We just kind of stepped in here and jumped in on a laptop. So, but thank you guys for your time and your contributions and your participation. So, all right. We will end the meeting. Everyone have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Heather.
Absolutely. Let me end the event here. Okay, good.